Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you again on this Thursday for our Thursday night Bible study. It's been a few weeks since we've done our Thursday night Bible study. We began the month of August with our church camp, and then the week after that was our MK camp, followed by a week of activities at the church, and then a week in the Philippines here already. And so I'm actually in the Philippines right now. I'm in Manila in the Parañaque area in a hotel room where I've been doing a little sabbatical studying and planning and preparation time for the ministry. And then I'm looking forward to, on this coming Sunday, going to the Santa Maria area of Manila and speaking there on Sunday morning, and then sharing with a group of pastors and having some time with our pastor friend in that area. And so we're looking forward to being with Sacred. And so today we're going to continue from Japan. This is August the 31st, and the subject we've been talking about is the 14 things that God has called us to be. And so today I thought we would begin with a review, since we're in the midst of a study on a series of things we are called as Christians to be, and we've already covered half of them. I'd like to begin with just a little review of the first 7 that we've talked about, and then continue today with the study of Be Prayerful. So we began by looking at the book of Ephesians chapter 4, where we talked about, while we were in America at the beginning of January, we began talking about the subject of be kind. And we looked at began with Ephesians 4:32, where it says, be kind one to another. And then the second thing we were called upon to be, was to be compassionate, from the same passage, be compassionate to one another. And the third thing we looked at for several weeks was be forgiving, from the same passage. And then when we came back to Japan, we continued our series with be patient, from James chapter 5, verse 7 through 11. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm. And so after looking for probably 12 weeks at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32, be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you. We looked at be patient. And then the 5th area we looked at was be understanding, from Luke chapter 6 primarily, where it says, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. In other words, try to be understanding of other people's perspectives and not have a heart of hostility, but a heart of compassion and kindness and forgiveness, and a desire for the good of those even who oppress you. And the 6th thing we looked at was, of course, the theme of the entire Bible, which is be loving, from 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8 through 10. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. And then we spent a lot of time up to the end of July looking at the subject of God's call for us to be happy. Where in 1 Thessalonians 5:16 it says, rejoice always. You will recall that we contemplated 7 Hebrew words and 7 Greek words, and then concluded with 1 more Hebrew word. So there are 8 Hebrew words and 7 Greek words used to express the idea of rejoicing, joy, and happiness in the Bible. And so if God used that many words to help us to contemplate the subject of and the importance of being happy, then maybe we should listen when God calls us to rejoice always, or rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice. And today we begin a series on the importance of being prayerful. Now, in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, following that rejoice always. Paul admonishes us, secondly, to pray continually in verse 17. It's interesting to be called upon to pray continually, because we find in the scriptures the importance of private prayer, and then we have in the scriptures the importance of corporate prayer. We have the importance of praying before our meals to acknowledge and recognize that the provision is from God. That's in the scriptures. And so when Paul says that we are supposed to pray continually in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17, it seems like it kind of negates the importance of all the other meaningful practices of prayer. And yet that's not the case. Because I think what Paul is talking about is the importance of always being in a condition or a heart mindset that says, I am with God always and he is with me always. In other words, like you're traveling in a car and you have one of your best friends traveling with you in the seat next to you. And even though you don't always have to be talking, you know that when you want to talk, he's right there. I think that's the idea behind pray continually. It could also be talking about the fact that we're called upon to be faithful in our prayer lives. But in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7, Paul clarifies this concept of pray continually just a little bit better. When he says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 and 7, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And so he basically lays out 5 concepts in this one verse that concludes with, if you do this, then the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And so if we are to be able to control our thoughts and control our emotions, control our anxiety, control the things that might drag us down or make us feel anxious, then prayer is the key. But he points out, as I mentioned, 5 things about prayer that are the key to not being anxious and allowing the peace of God to guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. The first is, he says, do not be anxious about anything. There is nothing in life that is important enough to worry about. Because even if we're worried, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. And so, Jesus, in Matthew chapter 6, told us not to worry, because we can't make ourselves taller, we can't increase the number of hairs on our head, we can't increase the number of years we have to live by worrying. And so if that's the case, and God takes care of the flowers of the field, which are here today and gone tomorrow, won't he much more clothe you and feed you and care for you? And so if we have faith, then we need not be anxious, we need not worry. And so the way that we don't worry is we trust God and we bring our petitions, our prayers, our requests to God. So he begins by saying, do not be anxious about anything. But second thing he says, in every situation. That's right. We as Christians tend to think that we should not be in any difficult situations. And if we are in a difficult situation, just pray to God and he'll deliver us from that difficult situation, which is not incorrect. But that's not all there is to a relationship with God. In our relationship with God, we are grateful in the good times and we are trusting in the bad. We acknowledge God's goodness when he blesses us, when he answers our prayers, and we acknowledge our dependence upon him when we struggle, because we know that he cares and that he is there with us always. And so he says, in every situation, whether it be good, acknowledge God, whether it be difficult, acknowledge God with either gratitude or trust. And then he says, don't be anxious, but in every situation, number 3, by prayer and petition. He uses these two words, which seem to be synonymous for prayer, but they're two different aspects of prayer, I think. The first Greek word that he uses for prayer is proseuche. And the proseuche reflects the idea of worship, of earnest prayer. It's also used to reflect a place of prayer. In other words, he's talking about regularly scheduled times of contemplation and worship of God, whether that be private or corporate. He's talking about prayer that reflects a heart of worship to God. Probably reflecting the idea that Jesus communicated in the Lord's Prayer when he said, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name." In other words, worshiping God through our prayer. And the second concept is the word petition. Desis. The word desis has more to do with our requests, a supplication, or in other words, an entreating for a need. So when we have struggles, when we have difficulties, it is good to bring our petitions to God, to specifically say, God, this is where I am struggling, this is where I have a need, and please guide and direct and provide and heal and whatever it is that we petition God for specifically that he accomplish on our behalf. So don't be anxious, but in every situation with prayer and petitions, number 4, with thanksgiving. Always with gratitude in our hearts for what God has done for us and for what God will do for us. Bring your prayers and petitions to God. You know, if a child comes to their parent and says, "Hey, we haven't done Baskin-Robbins for a long time. Can we go out to Baskin-Robbins?" And the parent says, "Sure, I'll take you tomorrow afternoon." The child is filled with joy and gratitude, although it's not until tomorrow. The child is filled with joy and gratitude at the knowledge that they get to go have Baskin-Robbins ice cream tomorrow. Now, why would the child be filled with joy and gratitude even though they have not yet received the ice cream? The answer is because they have faith in the promise of their parents. In other words, the promise of a parent is just as good as if it's already done. And so they can already rejoice, and they can always already feel gratitude to God for his promises, or to the parents in this case, but extending that to our relationship with God, we can already, based on God's promises, rejoice and be grateful for not only what he has done on our behalf, but what he will and can do if we bring our prayers and petitions or supplications to him. Which brings us to our 5th observation, which is present your requests to God. The concept of present your requests to God is laying them at his feet and trusting him with them. There is a church in Korea that has had a practice for many, many years of what I believe they call a baby box. And the church has in their wall a little box. They can pull it down, and the mothers that have given birth to children that they are not able to care for or that they are not desirous of raising, they can take those babies and put them in the box and present them to the pastor, who will then take that baby and care for that child. And that pastor has placed hundreds of babies up for adoption that have come through his ministry in that way. And the idea is that parents bring their babies and present them for care to the pastor of that particular church. And I think in the same way, God calls upon us to present our requests to God. Meaning, when we ask God to supply our needs, when we ask God to meet a need, then we present that to Him and we leave it in His hands to care for and provide for. So again, be prayerful is our admonition that we are beginning a study in now that it's August 31st. In the month of September, we will continue this study in the concept of be prayerful. And I look forward to spending more time sharing some more concepts from the scriptures with you on what God calls us to be. Thanks for joining us. I'll be in Japan for our next Thursday night Bible study, so I'll see you then.